When you were in your 20s and you were on all these medications, what were your relationships like? Because I know your sort of emotional side gets a little blunted
Mhm.
with all of these drugs. Were your relationships good or bad? Were they difficult? What was going on there?
Mhm. Romantic relationships were more or less non-existent. I would go on a couple dates here and there, but I really didn't have any. I had a relationship that lasted a couple months when I was about 23, and then basically didn't have another one until I was 31. There's some dating in between. And a big part of it was I couldn't really connect to other people. It wasn't. Let me rephrase. I couldn't connect because there wasn't any curiosity. One of the things that the drugs really affected was my curiosity and creativity. So if you're not curious about the world, if you're not curious about other people's experience in it, you kind of by definition can't have a particularly meaningful romantic or even a platonic friendship, because you have to have a level of curiosity about the other person in order to form connection. And I just didn't. So, because I wasn't curious about anything. And again, I just thought that's who I was. I thought I just was apathetic and blasé, and I was born that way. I had a business partner for many years that was not easy. It was a very difficult relationship for both of us, and I've wondered many times if I hadn't been medicated, if I would have not entered into that partnership, because I think I might have been more aware of the emotional difficulties of it in the early days. But then once I got into it, your business partners is very hard to get out of that when you're running a business together. Um, and I do have some friends that I made at that point who we are still connected today, and they knew what was going on when I was in withdrawal. They were kind of, those trench friends who really stick with you. But my relationships now are very different, because in addition to a curiosity that I didn't have, I'm also very attuned to who makes me feel good and who doesn't. So I don't spend time with people who don't basically add to, if you make me tired, then we don't really spend a lot of time together. I need to be around people who lift me up. And vice versa. I mean, the mark of a good relationship is that you do that for each other. I couldn't feel that from my 20s. I couldn't discern who was taking energy versus giving. Now I can, and so I'm significantly pickier, but the quality of my relationships is much better.
Was there a relearning process of trying on relationships, or when you started feeling more emotions? I know you dealt with some very, very intrusive and violent side effects, but
Yes.
what was that like?
Well, so I was not, when I was going through withdrawals, I didn't tell too many people about it. I was
Mhm.
especially not talking about the intrusive and violent thoughts, because there was so much shame around it.
Mhm.
And I kept that quiet for a very long time. I probably didn't start to really openly talk about that until the past couple years. I knew that even when I wrote about it in the book, I was worried about giving it to some people who were close to me, because I was still filled with shame about what I was experiencing. And, briefly, these are just the kind of intrusive, violent thoughts about hurting yourself or other people that come up really suddenly. Kind of like, the best way I can describe it is, I know most people, if you've been on a highway, and you might think to yourself, what if I just drove the car right into the median or off the bridge? It's just a thought that pops in, and you kind of say to yourself, where did that come from? It's very old. It's destabilizing. Um, it was like that for me, but all the time, and triggered by other people, just like literally their faces, just seeing their face. So it was awful, because there was just so many terrible things that were running through my mind. And this is something that happens to people in withdrawal. I had never experienced it before. If I had told my psychiatrist about it, I was worried she was going to deem me a danger to myself and put me on an involuntary psychiatric hold, which is how I could have gotten, diagnosis of multiple things. And so I just kept it in. And so I was not really, I didn't tell anyone about that when it was happening. But I did meet someone. I met someone about a year after I had gotten off all the drugs. And, you know, we're not together anymore, but God bless that man, because for like a good 5 years, he basically helped me come back online is the best way I can describe it, because I had entered into a relationship with him at a time when the only frame of reference I had had for being an unmedicated person was as a 14-year-old child, and I was a 31-year-old woman. So I had to not just relearn, but learn a lot of things about myself and about how to connect with other people, how to deal with other people, I had to learn why I was responding to things in the way I was, because it wouldn't always make sense. And, you know, he was very patient, and he was a huge, huge help and a huge part of my life for a long time. And we're not together anymore, which is absolutely the right call. But for the time and place we were, I had to navigate that. And thank God I had a supportive partner to do it. Because a lot of people don't. They lose relationships during something like this because, I mean, I was a different person when I was medicated than when I wasn't. So if you get into a relationship when you're medicated and decide to come off of them, sometimes people wake up one day and say, wait, I'm not the same person. I wouldn't have made these choices. But here's the life I chose, you know? That can create some real tension in relationships.
Yeah.